In the summer of 2019, deep beneath the sun-scorched earth of northern Israel, archaeologist Dr. Sarah Cohen made a discovery that would shake the foundations of religious history. Within an ancient temple complex dating back to the 9th century BCE, her team unearthed a stone tablet bearing an inscription that defied conventional understanding. The tablet, remarkably well-preserved, contained a prayer addressed not just to Yahweh but to another divine figure, one whose name had been deliberately erased in antiquity. As Dr. Cohen's fingers traced the weathered engravings, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was touching something that was never meant to be found. "What we're seeing here," she explained in her field journal, "challenges everything we thought we knew about early Hebrew worship. This isn't just another artifact. It's evidence of a theological complexity that has been lost to time." The discovery sent shockwaves through the academic community. Similar findings began emerging across the region: temple inscriptions, household shrines, and ritual objects, all pointing to a startling possibility. The early Israelites may have worshipped more than one divine being. The question was no longer if there were other gods, but why their existence had been so carefully concealed. The concept of monotheism stands as the cornerstone of Abrahamic faiths, a truth considered unshakable for millennia. Yet within the ancient texts themselves lies a perplexing contradiction that scholars have long grappled with. In the very first chapter of Genesis, a curious phrase appears: "Let us make man in our image." This plural form repeats throughout the Old Testament, raising questions that have challenged biblical scholars for centuries. Traditional interpretations attribute these plurals to the royal we or conversations with angels, but recent archaeological discoveries suggest a more complex reality. Dr. James Richardson, a leading expert in ancient Near Eastern religions at Oxford, notes, "The evidence we're finding in ancient Hebrew settlements shows a religious tradition far more nuanced than previously understood." The early Israelites appear to have recognized multiple divine beings, with one supreme deity emerging gradually over centuries. This understanding is supported by discoveries across the region, from household shrines in Jerusalem to temple inscriptions in Samaria. Each artifact adds another piece to a puzzle that reveals a fascinating picture of early Hebrew worship. The monotheism we know today appears to have evolved from a more complex theological system. The implications are profound. If the ancient Hebrews acknowledged other divine beings, what prompted the shift to strict monotheism? What truths lie buried in the layers of biblical text, waiting to be uncovered? These discoveries raise profound questions that reach far beyond academic curiosity. As we unravel the complex tapestry of ancient Hebrew religion, each answer leads to more unsettling questions. Consider the implications hidden within the Dead Sea Scrolls, where references to divine councils and celestial beings appear with surprising frequency. In one fragmentary text, dated to the 2nd century BCE, we find explicit mentions of a divine hierarchy that challenges our modern understanding. As Dr. Rachel Martinez, curator at the Israel Museum, explains, these texts reveal a religious worldview where Yahweh presided over a divine council, similar to the pantheons of surrounding cultures. But this raises critical questions about the nature of biblical revelation. If the early Hebrews recognized multiple divine beings, what catalyzed the transition to strict monotheism? The answer may lie in the dramatic events of the Babylonian exile, when the entire religious identity of Israel faced extinction. The stakes of these questions extend beyond historical curiosity. They touch the very foundation of three major world religions and challenge our understanding of religious evolution. How do we reconcile these archaeological findings with centuries of theological tradition? What does this mean for modern faith? More importantly, these discoveries force us to confront uncomfortable possibilities about how religious ideas develop and change over time. The transformation from early Hebrew religion to modern monotheism appears more complex and deliberate than previously understood. As we delve deeper into the ancient texts and examine new archaeological evidence, we must ask, what other religious truths have been shaped by historical forces? How much of what we consider timeless revelation bears the marks of human development? The mystery begins in the opening chapters of Genesis, where the text presents a linguistic anomaly that has puzzled scholars for generations. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, Genesis 1:26, words that seemingly contradict the fundamental principle of monotheism. This plural language isn't isolated. Throughout Genesis, we find similar instances. Behold, the man has become like one of us, Genesis 3:22, and come, let us go down and confuse their language, Genesis 11:7. Traditional interpretations have long explained these as examples of the royal we, or God addressing his heavenly court of angels. However, recent analysis of ancient Hebrew texts suggests something more significant. Professor David Thompson of Hebrew University points to parallel passages in Ugaritic texts where similar plural pronouns explicitly referred to divine councils. The grammatical structure in Genesis mirrors these older Canaanite texts, suggesting a shared theological context. Archaeological findings from early Israelite settlements reinforce this connection. Household shrines dating to the early monarchic period, 1000 to 800 BCE, show evidence of diverse religious practices. The inscriptions found at these sites often reference multiple divine beings, with one supreme deity at their head. The plural language in Genesis may preserve traces of an earlier religious understanding, one where Yahweh presided over a divine council, similar to the pantheons of surrounding cultures. This raises profound questions about the development of biblical monotheism. One of the most enigmatic figures in biblical texts is the mysterious angel of the Lord, whose appearances throughout the Old Testament present a theological puzzle. This being speaks with divine authority, accepts worship, and is often indistinguishable from God himself. Consider the burning bush encounter in Exodus 3. The text first states that the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in flames of fire from within a bush. Yet moments later, this same figure declares, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses hides his face, recognizing he stands in divine presence. This pattern of ambiguous identity repeats throughout Scripture. In Genesis 16, when this figure appears to Hagar in the wilderness, she calls him El Roi, the God who sees. The text presents no correction to her understanding. Similarly, when the angel of the Lord appears to Abraham at Mamre, the patriarch treats him as divine, and the being accepts such treatment. The Judges narrative provides even more striking examples. When the angel appears to Gideon, the conversation flows seamlessly between the angel of the Lord and the Lord himself. Later, when appearing to Manoah and his wife, they exclaim, "We have seen God." Yet they had encountered the angel of the Lord. Ancient Near Eastern texts from the same period reveal that neighboring cultures often recognized divine intermediaries, beings who carried the full authority of the chief deity. Archaeologist Dr. Sarah Mitchell notes inscriptions from Mari and Ugarit describing similar divine messengers who embodied the presence of their gods. The Jerusalem temple artifacts, dating to the First Temple period, show evidence of ritual practices that may relate to this complex understanding of divine presence. Incense altars bear inscriptions suggesting offerings were made both to Yahweh and to his divine manifestation. This angel of the Lord appears to be more than a mere messenger. He carries the divine name within himself, accepts worship, and speaks with ultimate authority. Yet he also appears distinct from Yahweh, creating a theological tension that later monotheism struggled to resolve. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the Qumran caves between 1947 and 1956, offer unprecedented insights into ancient Hebrew religious thought. Among these ancient texts, several fragments reveal a more complex understanding of divine beings than previously recognized. The Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice, for example, describes an elaborate heavenly temple with multiple divine beings serving in various roles. This text, dated to the Second Temple period, presents a celestial hierarchy that goes far beyond simple angels. Professor Robert Kubler's analysis of these texts reveals references to divine beings called Elohim, the same word used for God in Genesis. Particularly significant is the scroll fragment 4Q246, known as the Son of God text. This document uses divine language to describe a figure distinct from the Most High God, yet clearly more than a mere angel. The parallel with the biblical angel of the Lord is striking. The War Scroll provides another fascinating glimpse into this worldview. It describes a cosmic battle involving multiple divine beings, with the Prince of Light leading God's forces. This text suggests that the Qumran community, despite their strict monotheism, recognized various divine or semi-divine beings. Archaeological evidence from Qumran itself supports these textual findings. The community's ritual baths and prayer halls show inscriptions referring to multiple heavenly beings. Yet these writings maintain a clear hierarchy, with one supreme deity above all others. The Manual of Discipline reveals how the community reconciled these beliefs with monotheism. While acknowledging multiple divine beings, they maintained that all power ultimately derived from one source, the God of Israel. These discoveries force us to reconsider our understanding of early Jewish monotheism. Rather than a simple belief in one God, it appears to have been a more nuanced system that recognized multiple divine beings while maintaining the supremacy of one deity. The religious landscape of ancient Israel was far more complex than modern monotheistic traditions suggest. Archaeological excavations across Israel and Jordan have revealed evidence of a rich pantheon that existed alongside early worship of Yahweh. In the highlands of Samaria, archaeologists have uncovered household shrines dating to the 9th–8th centuries BCE. These shrines contained multiple divine figures, with inscriptions referring to both Yahweh and other deities. Of particular interest are the recurring references to Asherah, who appears in inscriptions as Asherah of Yahweh, suggesting a possible divine consort. The discovery at Kuntilat Adrud, an 8th century BCE site in the Sinai, provides compelling evidence of this religious diversity. Inscriptions found there read, "I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria and by his Asherah, and Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah." These texts suggest that different regions recognized different manifestations of Yahweh, each with their own associated divine beings. Temple remains at Tel Matzah, just outside Jerusalem, have yielded ritual objects depicting multiple divine figures. These artifacts, dating to the monarchy period, indicate that even in the heartland of Yahweh worship, other divine beings were acknowledged and revered. The biblical text itself preserves traces of this earlier religious world. Psalm 82 describes a divine council, where God stands among the Elohim gods and renders judgment. This imagery reflects a worldview where Yahweh presided over a divine assembly, similar to the pantheons of surrounding cultures. This evidence suggests that early Hebrew religion recognized a complex divine hierarchy, with Yahweh as the supreme deity, but not the only divine being. The relationship between Yahweh and other deities in ancient Israel was marked by a gradual transformation rather than immediate exclusivity. Inscriptions from the monarchic period reveal a fascinating evolution in how the Israelites understood their primary deity in relation to others. The famous inscriptions from Elephantine, an ancient Jewish military colony in Egypt, show that as late as the 5th century BCE, some Jews recognized multiple deities alongside Yahweh. Temple documents mention offerings made to Yahweh and other divine beings, suggesting a hierarchy rather than exclusive monotheism. Archaeological evidence from Jerusalem's Temple Mount period reveals a similar pattern. Temple artifacts include inscriptions mentioning Yahweh and his host, suggesting a divine council or celestial court. The term host of heaven appears repeatedly in biblical texts, often in contexts suggesting divine beings rather than mere angels. The prophetic books themselves preserve evidence of this religious complexity. Jeremiah's repeated condemnations of those who burned incense to the Queen of Heaven indicate that many Israelites saw no contradiction between worshiping Yahweh and honoring other divine beings. In the northern kingdom of Israel, inscriptions from Samaria show that Yahweh was worshipped alongside Baal, though often in superior position. The prophet Elijah's famous contest on Mount Carmel wasn't about whether Baal existed, but rather which deity was supreme. The transformation toward exclusive monotheism appears to have accelerated during the reign of King Josiah. His religious reforms, described in 2 Kings 23, involved actively removing other deities' shrines and centralizing worship in Jerusalem. This suggests that, until this period, multiple divine beings were openly acknowledged. An inscription from Tel Dan dating to the 9th century BCE refers to Yahweh and Hizerah, indicating that even in official contexts, other divine beings were recognized. However, this inscription also places Yahweh in a clearly superior position, foreshadowing the eventual move toward monotheism. The transformation of Hebrew religion from a complex divine hierarchy to strict monotheism was a gradual process, dramatically accelerated by historical trauma. The Babylonian exile, 586 to 539 BCE, proved to be the crucial turning point in this religious evolution. Prior to the exile, archaeological evidence shows varying religious practices across different regions of Israel and Judah. The destruction of the first temple and the forced relocation to Babylon prompted a profound religious crisis. The exile raised urgent questions. Why had Yahweh allowed this catastrophe? How could he be worshipped without his temple? The prophets of the exile, particularly Ezekiel and 2nd Isaiah, provided a revolutionary answer. They reinterpreted the disaster not as Yahweh's defeat, but as his sovereign action to punish and purify his people. This theological shift demanded exclusive loyalty to Yahweh alone. During the Persian period, 539 to 332 BCE, returning exiles brought this transformed faith back to Jerusalem. Temple artifacts from this period show a marked decrease in references to other divine beings. The Second Temple was dedicated exclusively to Yahweh, with no trace of the multiple shrines that characterized earlier worship. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah document aggressive reforms against any worship besides that of Yahweh. Intermarriage with non-Jews was forbidden, partly to prevent the influence of other deities. The community's boundaries were defined increasingly by exclusive devotion to one God. By the Hellenistic period, 332 to 63 BCE, Jewish monotheism had become firmly established. The process that began centuries earlier, accelerated by exile and Reformation, had produced a faith centered entirely on one supreme deity. The various names used for God in ancient Hebrew texts provide crucial insights into the development of religious thought. Each name, El Shaddai, Yahweh, Elohim, Adonai, carries distinct implications about how the divine was understood at different periods. The name El Shaddai first appears in Exodus 6:3. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. This passage suggests a historical progression in divine revelation, with different names representing different understanding periods. Archaeological findings from patriarchal-era sites reveal widespread use of El compounds in divine names. Inscriptions from Ugarit and Canaan show El as a general term for deity, often combined with specific attributes. El Shaddai might thus represent an early stage in Hebrew religious development. The name Yahweh, introduced explicitly in the Exodus narrative, marks a significant shift. Temple inscriptions from the monarchic period show increasing prominence of this name, eventually becoming the primary designation for Israel's God. The term appears in the Mesha Stela, confirming its early usage beyond biblical texts. Elohim, interestingly, is grammatically plural, yet often used singularly. Early Hebrew inscriptions show this term used both for the supreme God and for other divine beings. The ambiguity in its usage hints at the complex religious understanding of the time. The name Adonai, literally meaning my lords, plural, similarly suggests traces of earlier religious concepts. Its use as a divine title, particularly in formal worship, preserves echoes of a time when divine authority was understood in more complex terms. The progression of these names through biblical history reveals a gradual transformation in religious thought, from the general El terms of the patriarchs to the specific Yahweh of the Exodus. We see a movement toward more defined monotheistic concepts. The religious development of ancient Israel did not occur in isolation. Comparative analysis with neighboring cultures reveals striking parallels in how divine beings were understood and worshipped during this period. In Mesopotamia, temple archives from Babylon and Assyria show similar patterns of divine hierarchy. The god Marduk, like Yahweh, rose to supreme status, while other deities continued to be acknowledged. Tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal describe divine councils similar to those mentioned in Hebrew texts. Egyptian religious texts from the New Kingdom period reveal a similar complexity. While Pharaoh Akhenaten attempted to establish exclusive worship of Aten, traditional Egyptian religion maintained a complex divine hierarchy with one supreme deity. The parallels with early Hebrew religious development are noteworthy. The Ugaritic texts from Ras Shamra provide particularly important comparisons. Dating from the same period as early Israel, these texts describe El as the head of a divine council, with Baal as his executive agent. This structure mirrors some aspects of how the angel of the Lord functions in Hebrew texts. Temple practices across the region show remarkable similarities. Incense altars found in Jerusalem match patterns found in other Canaanite temples, suggesting shared ritual traditions. The architecture of Solomon's temple, as described in biblical texts, follows patterns found throughout the region. Sacred spaces excavated in ancient Phoenician cities reveal similar arrangements of divine hierarchy. Inscriptions mention primary deities alongside lesser divine beings, much like early Hebrew religious sites. The terminology used for these divine beings often parallels biblical language. The transformation toward monotheism in Israel, while unique in its completion, followed patterns seen elsewhere in the ancient Near East. Various cultures showed tendencies toward elevating one deity while maintaining recognition of others, though none took this process as far as Israel eventually did. Recent archaeological findings continue to illuminate the complex religious landscape of ancient Israel. Several key discoveries since 2000 have provided new insights into how divine beings were understood and worshipped. Excavations at Tel Motza, west of Jerusalem, revealed a temple complex dating to the monarchic period. This discovery challenges the traditional view that the Jerusalem temple held exclusive authority. The temple's artifacts include multiple divine figures, suggesting official recognition of various divine beings even near Jerusalem. At Khirbet Qeiyafa, archaeologists uncovered a temple complex from the 10th century BCE. The site's religious artifacts show a mixture of practices, with inscriptions mentioning both Yahuwah and other divine names. This suggests that early Israelite religion was more diverse than previously thought. The discovery of administrative texts from the 8th century BCE at Tel Dan provides crucial evidence about official religious practices. These texts mention offerings to multiple divine beings, while still acknowledging Yahweh's supremacy. The formal nature of these documents indicates that such practices were officially sanctioned. Seal impressions found in Jerusalem City of David, dating to the late monarchic period, show a gradual shift in religious imagery. Earlier seals often depicted multiple divine symbols, while later ones focused exclusively on Yahweh's symbols, tracking the progression toward monotheism. Recent excavations at Lachish have yielded temple remains from different periods, allowing archaeologists to track changes in worship practices over time. The evidence shows a gradual reduction in divine imagery, with later periods focusing increasingly on abstract symbols associated with Yahuwah alone. The Babylonian exile marked a pivotal transformation in Hebrew religious thought. The destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE and the subsequent deportation forced a fundamental reassessment of religious identity and divine understanding. Archaeological evidence from Babylon shows how exiled communities maintained their religious practices. Clay tablets from Nippur and Al-Yahudu document Jewish communities struggling to preserve their identity while adapting to new circumstances. These texts reveal a growing emphasis on Yahweh's universal authority rather than his territorial connection to Jerusalem. The prophetic writings of this period, particularly Ezekiel's visions and 2nd Isaiah's proclamations, show a dramatic shift in theological understanding. In Babylon, surrounded by impressive temples and grand idols, the exiles developed a more abstract conception of divine presence. Yahuwah was no longer tied to a specific place but understood as transcendent and universal. Temple artifacts from this period show a marked change in religious imagery. The elaborate divine iconography of the pre-exile period gave way to more abstract symbolism. This shift suggests a move away from physical representations of divine beings toward a more conceptual understanding. The experience of exile also prompted a systematic collection and editing of religious texts. Evidence from this period shows careful preservation of earlier writings, but with a new interpretative framework emphasizing Yahweh's exclusive authority. The trauma of exile became understood as divine punishment for failing to maintain exclusive loyalty to Yahweh. The process of compiling and editing biblical texts during and after the exile reveals a systematic effort to reshape religious understanding. The scribal activity of this period left distinctive marks that scholars can now identify in the biblical text. Evidence from the Persian period shows intense scribal activity in Jerusalem. Returning exiles brought with them collections of texts that would form the core of the Hebrew Bible. The Great Assembly, traditionally credited with this work, appears to have standardized religious practices and interpretations. The compilation process wasn't merely collection, but careful editing. Analysis of biblical manuscripts shows systematic changes in how divine beings are presented. Earlier texts that suggested multiple divine beings were often reframed within a strictly monotheistic context. Archaeological findings from this period include scribal quarters near the Second Temple, where evidence of extensive copying and editing activity has been found. Writing implements, scroll fragments, and administrative texts show organized efforts to standardize religious texts. Comparative analysis of surviving manuscripts reveals editorial patterns. References to divine councils were reinterpreted as angelic assemblies. Phrases suggesting other deities were modified or given new explanatory contexts. The resulting texts preserved ancient material while guiding readers toward monotheistic interpretation. The standardization of temple practices during this period also influenced textual development. Documents from the Second Temple period show increasing emphasis on proper interpretation of sacred texts, with authority concentrated in official scribal circles. The evidence for deliberate changes in religious understanding appears in multiple forms across archaeological and textual records. Each discovery adds to our understanding of how ancient Hebrew religion was gradually reshaped. Temple inscriptions from the Second Temple period show dramatic changes in religious language. Earlier references to multiple divine beings disappear, replaced by expressions focusing solely on Yahweh. Administrative texts from temple archives document changes in ritual practices, eliminating elements that suggested recognition of other divine beings. The transformation appears clearly in burial practices. Earlier tombs often contained multiple divine symbols and references to various divine beings. Later burials show exclusively monotheistic imagery and inscriptions, reflecting the community's changed understanding. Linguistic analysis of biblical texts reveals layers of editing. Older poetic sections often preserve references to divine councils and multiple divine beings, while later prose sections reinterpret these same elements in monotheistic terms. The Book of Deuteronomy, in particular, shows evidence of systematic theological revision. Household religious items tell a similar story. Archaeological excavations show that family shrines, once common in Israelite homes, gradually disappeared. Personal seals and amulets from different periods demonstrate a shift from multiple divine symbols to exclusively Yahweh-focused imagery. The changes also appear in international diplomatic correspondence. Letters and treaties from different periods show how Israel's religious self-presentation to other nations evolved, increasingly emphasizing exclusive devotion to one deity. The evidence accumulated across archaeological discoveries, ancient texts, and historical records reveals a complex picture of religious development in ancient Israel. The transformation from early Hebrew religion to strict monotheism appears to have been a gradual process, shaped by historical events and theological reflection. Key findings emerge from multiple sources. Archaeological evidence shows early Israelite recognition of multiple divine beings, with Yahweh holding supreme position. Temple inscriptions and artifacts document the gradual shift toward exclusive worship. Household religious items demonstrate how these changes affected daily life and personal devotion. The biblical texts themselves preserve traces of this earlier religious understanding. References to divine councils, plural language for God, and the mysterious angel of the Lord suggest a more complex original theology. The careful editing and reinterpretation of these elements show how later generations understood them in monotheistic terms. The Babylonian exile proved crucial in this development. The trauma of exile and the challenge of maintaining religious identity in a foreign land accelerated the move towards strict monotheism. The compilation and editing of sacred texts during this period helped standardize the new understanding. The historical evidence about ancient Hebrew religion raises important questions for modern faith traditions. Understanding how religious ideas develop through history need not diminish their significance, but can enrich our appreciation of their depth and complexity. The gradual development of monotheism shows how religious understanding can deepen over time. The Israelites' journey from recognizing multiple divine beings to embracing exclusive devotion to Yahweh reflects a profound theological maturation. This process involved serious reflection on the nature of divinity and humanity's relationship with the divine. For modern believers, these findings provide context for understanding their own religious traditions. The biblical texts preserve traces of this religious development, showing how each generation struggled to understand and express their relationship with the divine. This history demonstrates how faith can remain dynamic while maintaining its essential truths. The evidence suggests that religious truth can be revealed progressively through human history, adapted to human understanding at different times. As archaeological research continues and new analytical methods develop, our understanding of ancient Hebrew religion will likely deepen further. Several important questions remain for future investigation. The relationship between religious development and historical events requires further study. How did international politics and cultural exchange influence theological understanding? What role did ordinary people play in these religious transformations? Questions about textual transmission also remain. How did oral traditions interact with written texts? How did different communities preserve and interpret their religious heritage? Future discoveries may help illuminate these processes. The ongoing excavations across Israel and neighboring regions promise new insights. Each discovery adds to our understanding of how ancient people understood and expressed their relationship with the divine. This historical knowledge can inform modern discussions about religious development and interpretation. The study of ancient Hebrew religion continues to demonstrate the complexity and sophistication of human religious thought through history. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey through ancient religious history. If you found this exploration of early Hebrew religion and the development of monotheism interesting, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. We're particularly interested in hearing your perspectives on how historical discoveries influence our understanding of religious development. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth historical investigations and archaeological discoveries. By subscribing, you support our team's ongoing research and content creation. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with friends and family who might be interested in religious history and ancient civilizations. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts and help us continue bringing these fascinating stories to light.